Yes, this is my 1968 Dodge Charger. I bought this in 1978 when I was 16 years old, and I've kept it all these years. This is the paint color and the paint it had when I bought it. I did have the top redone at one point in the early 80s because it had completely disintegrated. The car doesn't really have any rust on it, a tiny bit by the rear quarter window and a little bit in the trunk, which I fixed. Really a straight car. It's got one or two minor dings to it. The hood is also bent, but aside from that, the car is very straight and very nice. Completely original interior. I need to replace the driver's seat and a few other things. It has a big block V8 in it. I had rebuilt it when I was 19 years old, and it is the same engine today. Last time I had driven the car on the street was in 1988, but it was starting to drive so poor that I basically parked it in a garage. It's always been garage kept. And every once in a while I would start it up, but it would run worse and worse every time I started it, so finally I just stopped running it. And it's been in hibernation. I've taken it out of the garage, you know, a couple times a year maybe, just to usually get at stuff in the garage. And last year I went and discovered the gas tank was completely rusted out. One reason probably why the car was always running bad and I was always rebuilding carbs and stuff like that is because my gas tank had gotten a lot of pinholes in it, and rust and bits of dirt, and that was always clogging up the fuel filter and the carburetor jets and causing all sorts of problems. So I replaced that with a brand new unit, and we installed it here with all new straps and rubber grommets, and for example where the gas tank hose goes into the tank, new grommets, gaskets, the whole 9 yards, clean the fuel lines, everything, and installed that. Now I have totally pure clean gas going up there. But that still, I did that about a year and a half ago, and that still didn't fix the running problem. So I didn't run it too much, didn't start it up too much. But I decided I would get the car out finally. This is May of 2012. And we'd start getting serious about getting this back on the road. The rear brakes are off because the right rear brake seized a couple years ago, but I've got all the stuff to rebuild the brakes in boxes. Here is the engine compartment, which we are in the middle of redoing a lot of things on it. One of the problems that I had is that the car ran noisy, not particularly smooth. When I first got it started, it was just shaking all over the place. So what I did is I replaced all the plugs, they were fouled, redid all the spark plug wires, cleaned everything up. This had been converted to Chrysler's electronic ignition kit, the blue box, the street version, and you can see the brain right here. You can see the brain mounted right there, the blue box, and of course the special distributor. And the car just ran very, very poorly. And what I did is I traced down that there was a lot of bad wires, some wiring that I had done as a kid that I just basically jerry-rigged a lot of stuff and didn't do a particularly clean job because I was 19 years old. And now I'm cleaning that up and putting it back to stock and putting back standard color codes where I had replaced wires that I thought were bad with non-standard codes just to get the thing running. Because back in those days it was all about how fast can I get the car back on the road and drive around. Not for originality or for a clean installation or anything of this nature. But I'm going to go through a few of the things that we did on the car. First thing is that the car did have on it a rebuilt Carter AVS. AVS stands for aluminum vacuum secondaries, and this is the right carburetor for the engine, so I had selected the right one, and I put this on probably 20 years ago, this rebuilt carb, and I was worried that sitting this long, seals might have dried up and we might have had problems. And it's still, I don't know if it's 100%, I haven't driven it yet, but I've really tuned it and really fixed some things on it and dialed it in. And that, along with straightening out the timing and the wires, fixed a lot. There's a couple things here from my Mopar friends I'll give tips on for cars that have been sitting for a while. The other thing that I immediately noticed is that I wasn't getting any charge out of the engine. It was, just totally discharging the battery. So, of course, your first thought is that, your alternator's bad. Well, it's very easy to have your alternator checked. If you've got a piece of equipment that'll check it, you can do it at home. And most people, all they have is maybe a voltmeter. A quick way to check it is you check your battery with nothing running on the car and the car off, and you should get a higher voltage when you turn the car on, obviously, because the alternator needs to be charging the battery. So, and when you give it gas, the charge rate should go up to a point. It shouldn't exceed, I think, about 15.2 volts. It should be in the 13 to 14 volt range. I wasn't getting any of that, so of course the first thing I did is take my alternator down to a auto electric outfit, and they tested. This alternator, which looked really good, it was probably a rebuilt unit from way back, was putting out fine. So what I did is I went and looked at the wiring, and I had a lot of cracked and broken wires, so I redid them right here. I'm still not complete with how I'm going to finish this off, but when you do fix wires in your loom, always solder them, and always use after you've soldered them, use shrink wrap. I like to stay away from electrical tape. This tape job is actually from the car originally, believe it or not. But use shrink tubing and solder all your joints together. The temptation is use crimp-on butt connectors, and those are okay sometimes. As a matter of fact, you can see over here that my battery cable, replacement battery cable I just got yesterday, has a little crimp-on to take the power to your starter relay. I'll eventually replace that with a solder on and put some red shrink wrap on. Make sure all your contacts are clean and tight too. The other problem that I had two other problems with why this system was not charging my battery. And I'm still not 100% sure we're completely dialed in yet. There's a few other wires I want to fix. But I'll share a situation with you that Mopar guys, if they've done a lot of work on their car, are all aware of. And that's what's called your bulkhead connector right here. This is your bulkhead connector, which on a 1968 has three different plugs in them with groups of wires. This plugs into this socket back here, which takes up on the other side of the firewall. Through years of heating and dirt blowing through here and all this, these contacts can become problematic. So you can have 12 volts coming in and 10 volts coming back out off the ignition switch. You don't want that. You want a little bit of voltage drop is okay because of the length of the wires going on, but you don't want significant. If you're getting 8 volts out of your firewall for ignition, you've got some problems there, and that's what I was getting. Once I took those connectors off, blew them out with compressed air, cleaned them with contact cleaner again and again, got in there on the male side with an emery board, then blew it out and sanded it down, then blew it out again, the voltage came out really clean. Other things to look for, okay, is voltage regulator. Now, your voltage regulator on Mopars sits right here. It might be kind of hard to see because it's black, okay? What the voltage regulator does is make sure that you don't get too much voltage generated by the alternator, which can then ruin your battery and also blow out systems that aren't made to go much above 12, 13, 14 volts. A lot of people think that your voltage regulator is fine as long as you're not exceeding the voltage range. That's a misnomer, and this car proves it, and I've seen this problem before. You can have a bad voltage regulator that is causing not enough charge to go back to your battery. Okay? Why? Because this voltage regulator controls the voltage going to your field circuit on your alternator. Okay? If it senses that you're over a certain amount of voltage, it stops sending current out to the field circuit so that your alternator stops basically sending out charging voltage. Okay? And then it resumes when it drops to a certain level. So it basically just regulates the voltage so you don't get over voltage and wreck your battery or other systems attached to it. But if it's not putting out any voltage at all, your field circuit collapses and you get no charging. Your car will literally run off its battery. That's exactly what my old unit was doing. This is my old unit, and Mopar guys might recognize this, the old P3690732 electronic voltage regulator. They sold this in the kit that I got my electronic Chrysler electronic conversion system with, saying you got to use this one, you got to use this one. If you don't use this one, you're going to have problems. They never really said what the problems were. But this unit was faulty. My old one was faulty, and I did some research on the internet and found out that other people really hate this unit. So the plus side is new voltage regulators, standard ones. They've switched them to all electronic anyway, so you're probably okay. Do your due diligence on that. Don't take my word for it. You want to be careful using this stuff on your car so you don't screw up components, but it's a thought to make anyway. The other key component, here's a nightmare item that a lot of people don't think about. It's your ballast resistor, which sits right here. It's like a piece of ceramic that you have right here in the circuit, okay? It is a ballast resistor, and I will tell you this. When those go out, a very unusual symptom happens that took me forever to trace down on my Super Bee. And the symptom is that your car won't start, but it will start to start if you keep the key in the start position. In other words, if you keep your starter engaged, you can feel your car starting to start, but as soon as you release the key to the run position, the car stops. That's a classic symptom of a failed ballast resistor. In my Super Bee, I have a column shifter and a column ignition. I took that thing completely apart, thinking it has to be the ignition switch causing such a problem. I put a new ignition switch in. It took me a good part of a day because it's really a pain to get that thing apart. And it didn't work. I did some research on the internet of all things. Boom, ballast resistor. And you can find information on that. Type in Mopar ballast resistor problems and you'll get a lot of information. Also, when you put a new one in, it's not uncommon for it to smoke or get really hot for a moment. That is typical, believe it or not. The ballast resistor on this unit checks out okay. After I did all these repairs, boom, I'm getting voltage to the battery that's within acceptable ranges, and my ammeter on my dash is perking along right like how it should. My other recommendations, if you're pulling a car out of hibernation that you haven't used for a long time and it hasn't been stored properly, what I recommend you do is squirt a little bit of oil in each spark plug hole. You're going to want to replace the plugs anyway. Label or remember very accurately, if you can, what spark plug cable goes where. Remove them all, remove all your spark plugs, put a little bit of oil in each spark plug hole, especially if you can get spray oil or spray lubricant, squirt it in there. Then put a big socket and ratchet on the end of your crank and hand crank that engine around. If you have to take the fan off, fine. You might want to do that anyway and refresh your belts and hoses. Crank that thing around and get some lubrication on those cylinder walls so you reduce the amount of potential scoring from firing this thing up, especially if you're not quite sure if your oil pump is working. And that's the thing to check for. Check for any noises and watch your oil pump gauge the minute you start this thing up and make sure you've got good oil pressure. Obviously, do not start it up with your ancient oil and oil filter in there. Take all that stuff off and refresh it before you start it. Put new coolant in the system as well. Check for leaks. You'll probably want to go around and look at vacuum leaks as well. You may want to, when you first start your car up, take off your vacuum lines and plug them with rubber plugs that you can get at your auto parts store. The reason I say for that is that if the car's been sitting for a long time, your plastic and rubber vacuum tubes have possibly gotten corrupt. This particular one has a 3-branch tree off the intake manifold. One feeds the brake vacuum for power brakes. One feeds the air activated doors on a charger like this. And this one right here activates the heater and defrost valve underneath the dash. If you have something like a vintage Corvette you have a line for your air activated headlight doors. You have another one for your air activated windshield wiper cover, and there may be many more. So you may want to disconnect those, get your car running well, dial in your idle circuit, dial everything in, tighten up, make sure your intake manifold is tight, and then put those back one at a time once you got your car tuned. Vacuum lines will make your life miserable if you have a vacuum leak and you're trying to tune your car and get it running straight. So take my advice and do that as well. If you still suspect a vacuum leak, you can take carburetor cleaner, cautiously spray it around the gasket of your carburetor and see if your engine RPM goes up. You may want to be reading a meter while you're doing it because it might go up imperceptibly to the ear, but it may go up looking at the scale. Also make sure that your dwell is set. In the case of your electronic ignition, there is a gap adjustment you set. You probably never have to ever set it again, but you have to set a gap adjustment. And make sure your timing is accurate. If your timing is inaccurate and you dial in your carburetor, the dialing of your carburetor won't be accurate. If the carb is way off, playing around with the timing is not going to fix it. They both have to be done right, because there's a complementary aspect in there. So I've done enough yapping. Let's see if this thing will still start from yesterday. Not as crispy as a startup as I want to get it, but it's getting there. There's a tiny little exhaust leak I can hear down here that we're going to attend to. There's other things I want to do. You'll notice this coil connection right here off positive. I just bypassed the old one. I probably thought it was bad. Use this terrible green wire nut, that's got to go. Bad press-on connection, that's got to go. An improper color connection on the other wire. This one I just fixed to go back to the a blue color like it should be. Carburetor's not leaking. Looking very good. But you can see already in a cold start, this thing is running pretty smooth. Inspected the vacuum advance hose, that's in good shape. I recommend, I'm going to improve this fuel routing, I don't like it, but I recommend a clear fuel filter so you can see the quality of fuel coming from your tank. Other things I don't like is I'm going to get rid of this rinky-dink engine block grounding wire that I did. Horrible job on that. I did that about 20 years ago. So a lot of learnings. Let's take a look inside the car and see what we've got. The car is obviously filthy as all get out, even though most of the time I have it covered in the garage. Factory white vinyl top. Inside, believe it or not, this is a white interior, but dark green accessories. That's not black, that's a dark green console. A dark green dash. The engine compartment looks like it's been spray bombed black. I've had people go, oh, you spray bombed your inside of your engine. No, it's the dark green that was never resprayed light green when the car was recolored. But here's the dash. The dash has got a crack in it here on the top, but the rest of the dash is in very good shape. This is a factory air car, and I still have all the factory air pieces to it, and a diagram how it all came together. I have a period Alpine, I won't say period, an 80s period Alpine that I was very careful to install this not to cut anything. I kind of looked ahead even when I was a young kid. But this is going to go because I have the original AM 8-track stereo unit that goes right here. It's huge, and it mounts right in here with the rear speaker control. I have the original rear speaker, the original parcel shelf, everything. That's going to go back in here. I've had people offer me a fortune just for the radio. I don't know why. I thought you could get that on eBay pretty cheap, but I don't know. Here's the factory AC control with all the tabs, and everything slides and everything works on it. Other options include what I love is the tick-tack-tock. Or is it the tick-tock-tack? Right here. I love that. Got a beautiful 150 mile an hour speedometer. And all my gauges work except the temp gauge, which never worked ever since I owned the car. Shifter-wise, it has the beautiful Torque Flight 727 auto transmission, which is one of the best in the whole world. The shift knob is from a 1969 because I just thought it was more rugged than the chrome, more delicate shift knob that is proper for the 1968 model. We're plenty warm now. Notice a nice healthy oil pressure. We're getting a little alternator. Before, this was only going to the negative no matter what I did because the car was living off its battery. A little loose still there. Got a little tuning we still have to do. But for a car that's been sitting, and I've spent about 4 hours putting it back together, it's getting there. My guess is I'll probably have to go through that carburetor or replace the carburetor. Not bad for a car that's been sitting for a long time that I've just put about a half a day's worth of work in so far. We're getting there. I particularly like contrasting this to my also very dirty 88 Mustang GT. The Charger was the first car I ever bought, period. This 1988 Mustang GT was the first new car I ever bought off the showroom floor, Birch Ford, in La Habra, California. Thank you for watching another exciting episode of Kevin Preston's Toy Box.